Welcome back, MTG Joe here. We're here today for week 1 metagame analysis for the standard best of 1 format. So we're going to be looking at what from the first just under a week's worth of data is performing best with the recent release of Foundations. Still very early, so keep that in mind as we kind of look through the decks. So things may change as we kind of go in, but we're starting to accumulate some data. We're going to look Diamond to Mythic Rank this week as it's about halfway through the month. It'll eliminate some of the noise we get at lower ranks and kind of see where people are going. There's a metagame challenge or qualifier weekend best of 1 today. There's also metagame challenge and standard this weekend. So we'll get a better view in terms of what people are trying beyond just kind of some of the more established decks, stuff of that nature as well. If you want to play in the metagame challenge, I have a video with a bunch of decks there. As mentioned in that video, and currently you can probably hear my voice, I'm currently sick, so slowly getting my voice back. So in this video, I may have to pause briefly. You might hear an odd cough here or there. I'm just trying to retrain my voice after having a pretty gnarly flu for the last week and a half. But let's jump into it. We have Standards Foundation Meta. We're getting the data from UntappedGG, what you see on the screen. Companion tool, tracks your win rates with other users, gives a whole bunch of cool stats, breakdowns, stuff like that. If you want to use Untapped, link is in the video description. I will paste these deck lists as well. In terms of metagame popularity, just in terms of what people are playing, Mono Red Aggro holds the highest game share of just under 12%, Boros Auras at 9%, Mono Black Midrange at about 8%, almost 9%, Boros Burn at 5%, the discard decks, they're always somewhat high, reasonable play rates, but there's never the same win rates as just the stock midrange decks. Stories Control at about 3.5, Orzhov combo, which is a Lifegain combo. Stay tuned to the end because I do have a note on these Orzhov combo decks that you probably, if you're interested in this deck, definitely do want to catch. And then the Mardu Aggro is basically the Boros Auras deck with Fling style effects. Just looking at the play rates, they have come down in terms of these Boros mono red decks, but I think in part it's because the decks are being diluted into slightly different. You'll have the burn, you'll have the prowess variants kind of mixed into there. So we are 75,000 games played from November 12th through the 16th, so 4.5 days of data. And I'm just gonna take a sip of water and we'll jump into it. So 16 land mono red, they're calling it Rakdos. 65%. So you find 16 draft basics. It's kind of the Fling Prowess, the Leyline decks of old. We have Shock being replaced by Burst Lightning here. Just a bunch of cheap pump effects. So we've seen kind of in the effect split between Manifold and Emberheart. The new card from Foundation's Bulk Up, Swole Goblin, is being played. 2 mana, double target creature's power. And then Flashback's probably pretty optimistic in this deck given that you need 6 of your 16 lands, so a little high in that respect. We've covered these decks with the Leyline decks before, but cheap creatures that you pump, get some effects, and then effectively fling them. You double up the fling damage with Scamp or Heartfire Hero, given the damage from the Burn Together as well as these creatures' abilities. Otherwise, you just have kind of prowess threats. Mono Black Midrange, Mono Black Demons, 64%. So this deck here has the combo of Unstoppable Slasher. If you connect with damage with a Bloodletter out, it one-shots your opponent. You also have Unholy Annex, which will gain and drain life if you have a demon out. It also creates a demon. Archfiend Ladros is another demon here. Then this deck's just loaded with various removal options for these aggressive decks. Cut downs, Anoint with Afflictions, Go for the Throats, Nowhere to Run, really effective against anything that's providing hexproof, like in the Boros Auras deck, ways that they want to protect their creatures. So we have stuff like that. Edict, Bat for kind of hand hate. We have a reprint of Liliana Dreadhorde General on a top end threat, so just a very strong planeswalker. The one thing I'll say with this mana base, you can probably get away with playing 1 to 2 Fountain Port or Myrex in here just to provide some utility lands as well. Duress is low-key pretty decent against a lot of these prowess decks just because half their decks are pump effects or protection effects or stuff like that. So it's not terrible to have these included as well. Sorry, had to mute for a cough. 64% for Boros Auras. So this is pretty stock in terms of what we had previously. Sheltered by Ghosts and Shard Mage's Rescue are kind of the engines of the deck, giving this archetype quite a boost in strength. You have your Mouse package as well as Optimistic Scavenger to pump up whenever you cast an aura or an enchantment, therefore. Make a big creature, double strike it, trample it, kind of kill him that way there. So some of these decks that we've covered before, we're not going to go into too much detail. I want to kind of focus on some of the newer decks. Speaking of newer decks, some amount of folks, 170 games played, mono white cats, yes, cats, 62%. Savannah Lions in 2024, almost 2025. Leon and Vanguard got a reprint, so you got kind of a Lifegain sub-theme here. This card actually goes pretty hard, the Sky Knight Squire. Keep losing to it in draft. 2 mana, 1/1. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, you get to put a 1/1 counter on it. Then as long as this creature has 3 or more counters, it gets flying and is a knight. So just big evasive creature in this deck. Things like helpful hunter cycles. You have a Rabo, which is a lord, and then when it or another non-token cat enters a battlefield, you get another token. So lots of ways to kind of stack your cat tokens. So you get like multiple kind of triggers there. Cthulhu's Flanker happens to be a cat with some graveyard hate, some other abilities. Patchwork Banner can be used as an anthem effect. You have Get Lost in here. Roaming Throne doubles up the ETB triggers. And then Regal Caracal is a Lord that also gives lifelink that gives 2 bodies. So a nice kind of top end effect. I would say in the mana base, I don't think you necessarily want. So this is my thing. Three Tree City, your curve's pretty low. You're not going like Elves where you're trying to go into Craterhoof. It doesn't tap for mana that's colored, so it kind of could hamper your multi-spell early. And you need to have the permanence. It's not like Devotion. So chances are if it's generating a lot of mana, you're already ahead on board. I don't think it's a good card. I think you just are better off playing just basics in this deck, honestly, if you're playing the Soulstone Sanctuary already, because that would mean you do have 6 kind of non-color producing lands, and then potentially 10 for the Get Lost in that case. One other thing that you might want to consider with this deck is, given the prevalence of the more aggressive decks, you can play something like Elspeth Smite. Just gives you another 1 mana answer in this deck. So kind of trimming on a little the top end, maybe the Patchwork Banners, in lieu of having a little bit more interaction in the main. So stock mono red, just kind of highlighting for those folks who were playing this deck previous, 61%. Basically the lightning strikes have been replaced with burst lightning, and then they're still playing shock. There was another variation that did a split of 2 shocks, 2 lightning strikes. That one there was like 0.5% lower. So basically configure how you want the shocks and lightning strike ratio based on what you're running into. Lightning strike does have the ability to kill slashers, kill glissas if you run into it. So 2 mana obviously versus 1 mana. Depends on what you're running into and how you want to best configure. Lightning strike can hit one of the red creatures that once it gets the prowess trigger, so that's also something to consider there. So that's kind of the update to mono red that we're seeing. Selesnya Rabbits, so this is pretty stock to what we've had before. This one here, Rabbit Tribal. What I wanted to kind of highlight is there was a new rabbit that came out in Hinterland Sanctifier. 1 mana, 1/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life. I think this card can be reasonable in the shell. You don't need to play 3 Phineas, given that it's legendary. Season of Burrow is pretty heavy on the cost. So you could kind of trim down there and then play a couple. I would probably try to find space for a full playset. Given you have so many creatures that like make extra bodies, hop to it, in these aggressive mirrors, it can give you some time to kind of stabilize where you can flood the late game and kind of overwhelm your opponent with just like volume of creatures. So I think that would be something that I would consider trying out in this shell here. The one thing with this deck and cats, these are somewhat rare and Mythic wildcard intensive decks to craft. They're limiting in the sense that these cards will only go into these decks. So keep that in mind when you are crafting. If you are limited on wild cards, you will want to be mindful to not go in a deck where it only works in one deck. Something like Unstoppable Slasher can go in Mono Black, can go in Dimir, can go in Rakdos, can go in Golgari, could go in any of those decks. So it's a lot more flexible in terms of value for wildcard. Patchwork, like the Valley of Might Caller, Warren War Leader, these are one deck cards. So keep that in mind. Boros Prowess, 58%, so a lot of overlap, and we're seeing like with some of these cards, like to that point, Slick Shot plays in a lot of these decks, the mouse package, so this is kind of a hybrid. It's not quite the Auras deck, it's not quite the Mono Red Prowess deck, like the Fling deck. You have Burst Lightning, Shocks, Sheltered by Ghost, as well as Boros Charm, no Bolt Wave in this particular version. You are playing full Thran Portal, plus the duels, plus 2 Restless Biovacs. But just kind of a very aggressively slanted, put pressure on your opponent, try to burn them out that way there. Still the mouse package, still Slick Shots, still your Swift Spears kind of mixed into that. An interesting one here, we have Bant Auras, 56%. So kind of the blue-white Aura shell, Entity Tracker for card advantage, Nurturing Pixie, can rebuy and buy. So it's kind of got like an eerie theme. You're playing Ivy in here that can double up on stuff. Philagi can mill and I guess find stuff. What's Peerless Recycling do? Turn target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. If it was gift, instead return 2 permanents. So you can kind of reanimate with this with the Surgical Suite. And then whenever you attack, put a 1/1 counter on something. You could, this town's not big enough to return stuff and kind of recast it. So interesting shell. It's like, one sec, I got a cough. Trying to get quicker with the mute button. So not quite like all in as aggro, but kind of recycling some of your effects. Haha, Peerless Recycling. Lets you rebuy some stuff. Interesting shell. I don't know how much stronger it would be. I feel like if you want to do this, you go the more linear route. Even just the blue-white version that's got the unblockable Nightmare dude. The 3-mana Enduring, the white Enduring, could be a little bit more reasonable here. This feels like it wants to kind of be Otterstorm and Auras and Ivy deck all mixed into one. But people love Ivy. Every time I post like something about Ivy, it's like the most downloaded deck. So Ivy enjoyers, this one's for you. So we have a version of Golgari Midrange. It's a kind of a demon sub-theme, 56%. So Archfiend, the Annex, kind of your core. This one's got slashers just for value. Some Shieldreds, 1 Glissa. Maelstrom Pulse was reprinted into the format. So if you have the older versions from the old, I think it was Historic Anthology, you can play those. Llanowar Elf in here. If you want the cool anime art, it's only 1,000 gold for it, so something to consider picking up. You don't have to buy the bundle. Bunch of cheap removal, Mosswoods, slashers, kind of value engine, stick a Dread Knight, have mono red, question how do they beat a 6/6. Kind of go from there. Restless Cottage is one of the best creature lands in the format, kind of getting you that value engine. Some of these will play Mirror Pool as some additional value lands, kind of mixed into it. So then we have another Golgari deck. This is Golgari Super Friends. And this one here is trying to do the Innkeeper's Talent instant alt combo. Doubling Season was printed. So Doubling Season may just end up being an easier way to pull this off. Because within Keeper's Talent, you do have to commit. And like, it's 7 mana over multiple turns. Might get them that way there. You could try out Doubling Season as well if you have them. But when your Planeswalkers come in, they come in with double the amount of counters. So Vraska one-shots them with poison counters. Liliana, each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and then sacrifices the rest. Vivian gives you an emblem. Creatures you control get +2/2, Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. Kind of mixed into there. Lily does the sack, so it's kind of big top end. You ramp with the Overlord. Loot lets you play extra lands. You could also reveal the top 6 cards of your library. Reveal a creature card with mana value equal to or less than the number of lands you control. Put it onto the battlefield. So you could cheat and play Overlord, one of Massacre Worm, the Dread Knights. You have Llanowar in here. Some cheap removal mixed in. So interesting deck. Now, Orzhov Lifegain combo is not doing good. This is the highest win rate of the versions that we see from Platinum to Diamond. There's ones as low as like 29%. For those unfamiliar, the combo. You need Bloodthirsty Conquer. So this reads whenever opponent loses life, you gain that much life. It creates an infinite loop with the inverse. So things like Enduring Tenacity, whenever you gain life, an opponent loses that much life. So it creates a loop. Same with Starscape Cleric. Same effect, kind of wording as the Enduring Tenacity. So with 2 of those cards out, Conquer and any of these, trigger life gain, life loss, creates a loop, opponent drains out. These are just not doing that well. Authority is pretty reasonable. I think it's kind of a mishmash here. Things like Shelter by or Destroy Evil is kind of fringe. Vengeful Blood Witch is more of like an aristocrat style card, not necessarily like a combo card. I do think Zorlin's strong in these shells to kind of rebuy stuff. Alenda's been pretty strong. Like I had this in draft and it soloed so many games. I think this card could be reasonable. Protection from a lot of the common removal in the format as well. Just, I don't know. This, I'd hold off maybe crafting these, seeing like, I don't know. I think there could be a way to build it, but like they're not doing well. Like if we look, like I said, that's the best one that I saw. There's like a control version, 45%. This one here is 29%. This one's kind of weirdly built all over the place. And then it just gets to like not enough games played to even reasonably count. So keep that in mind. The last deck, this one is from a Quantum Entanglement. They're 19-7. With this one here, it is a Rakdos Sacrifice deck. So this deck's been pretty fun. I've been playing a variation, a bit of best of 1, best of 3. You have Braids that gets you value in this deck. We've seen it before with Forge. Lots of cheap kind of sack style effects. The Disturbing Mirth's a really nice card advantage engine. Torch is really good in the format. Final Vengeance is cheap removal. You have Percussionist here for card advantage. Freebooter for ramping kind of card advantage. Hopeless Nightmare for value. Spiteful Hexmage. Nowhere to Run is a really nice removal option. And then this version's playing Viper. The version I was playing is just on like the Urabrask Forges and then a little bit higher. Like I was playing it in best of 3 on stream, and then I played it in best of 1 and was doing pretty reasonable in best of 1 as well. There were 3-0 in best of 3. So this one here, Fear of Lost Teeth in here, FOMO, and then like the Forge package kind of mixed into there. So you can find this one on my profile, but I'll link the one Quantum here so you can see as well. That's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you think of best of 1, and good luck in those in the qualifier, and good luck for those playing in the Metagame Challenge. Catch you next time. Thanks for watching.